I'm going to be getting started here this morning. I'm going to be kind of hanging out in the same place. Did not plan for the worship service to go like that, but it makes perfect sense now because I'm going to be continuing the subject of crossing over. But as I begin to kind of prepare my heart this week, and as I kind of begin to study some, I had a couple things wrote down, was going to move on to chapter 4, and I just couldn't leave the presence thing. I couldn't leave that, and being able to talk about presence, and then I was going to kind of get into the generational thing with placing the stones and all this stuff. But as I began to prepare my heart, and I had some stuff wrote down, like I said, and as I woke up Saturday morning, I just kind of sat in my chair and I just began to just pray a little bit, and I just began to just write. And I just want to stay in this presence thing a little longer. And I think that what we entered into today and what we experienced today was an announcement to what it is that he is wanting to do in this house. That it was an announcement, it was a birthing moment, an announcement for what it is that he wants to do in this place, in this house, to host his presence the way that we were designed to come together and to host his presence. So I just want to keep on that subject here this morning as we are moving forward. As I said last week, when we begin to follow presence and we begin to host the presence how we were designed to, that miracles would take place, breakthroughs would be present, that in a moment deliverance would be received, life transformed, generations set free, and that I wanted to see Freedom House be a house that hosts the degree of presence that we were designed for. We will not get there by works or by striving, but by faith and trusting in Him, that where He says go, we will go, and when He says cross over, we'll cross over. So in saying that this morning, we had an opportunity, or an opportunity came this morning, and there were those that entered into that place of crossing over this morning, and entered into that place this morning to be able to encounter a measure and a degree of His Spirit and of His presence in this house. And in a moment in that presence and in that spirit, it can transform a heart and a life. It can do way more than what I can do striving and putting all these things into place and doing all these things and doing all this stuff and checking all these boxes. In a moment, in the presence of Almighty God, can come in and consume a heart and can consume a life if that heart and if that life is open up to be willing to receive what it is that He has here. The measure of trust, this measure of trust calls us to let go, for us to not have control of the situation, and for Him to lead us, and for us to trust in Him here this morning. As a leader this morning, I could have taken the bull by the horns and said, no, we got to check the boxes. We've sung our songs, we've done our thing, and we followed the protocol of church per se. And I had a moment that I could have, as a leader, not allowed what it was that happened to happen in here this morning. Instead, me with an open heart being willing to go, you know what, it doesn't matter what it looks like. Yes, I'm the one that's supposed to be kind of leading this thing and going, but in a moment in His presence, to let Him come in and overtake and consume and let Him lead and let Him guide. And even in doing that, it just began to just spin off from the worship team, and it began to spin off in individuals that are here, and it just began to just be an all-consuming presence in this house here this morning. And that is the measure of presence that I want to host. That is what I want to be able to come into this place and not have to get all the way through the whole entire set list. I want that coming out of the gate. I want that the moment that you step foot into this building, that presence can come in and consume each heart and each life that is here. When you follow presence, you begin to go to a land that He has already conquered. Remember in our story, in Joshua chapter 2 and chapter 3, it's the land that Yahweh has already designed for them. He's already given it to them. He has already promised Moses that. He gave the promise to Joshua. And just by them following the presence and following the having the heart and trusting in Him and just following that presence and being able to lead and guide them into the places, they begin to take the land back that He has already conquered and already given Him. He is just wanting us to be obedient and follow Him. When Jesus hung on the cross, He done more than just get us a ticket to heaven. I've said this multiple times. He's made us victorious. He's made us the head and not the tail, above and not beneath. He has identified us as sons and daughters. He has made a way to restore us back into union with Father, Son, and Spirit. In saying that, whenever the Israelites were wandering in the wilderness for all of that time, and they were back and forth and going around, they were sustained for that time. They were surviving. Manna was fallen. They had everything they needed, but they were not thriving. And I don't know about you, but there's something that doesn't set right with me, that we as sons and daughters here on earth just to survive. I'm not here just to survive. I'm here to conquer. I'm here to take over everything that He has designed for me to take over. I'm here to call everything back into order that needs to be called back into order. I'm here to consume every bit of darkness that needs to be consumed with every bit of light that He has designed to put on the inside of me. And each of you that are sitting in here today, not just because I'm a pastor and I'm leading a church, but each one of you individually sitting here today has the light and the same Spirit that raised Christ Jesus from the dead inside of you and has quickened your mortal body, and you have the same authority and the same power that Jesus did to walk the earth, to heal, to make wholeness come forth, to allow presence to consume everywhere you go and in everything you do. But you have got to be willing to open up and to trust Him and to allow Him to come into your heart and to come into your life to the degree that you were designed to. And what we have done is we have kept Him back at a distance, and we haven't allowed Him to come in and consume us. Just like some of those that were in here today, you had a choice to make. You either get in that presence and you allowed that presence to totally consume you. I couldn't tell you if I had been sitting up here for 5 minutes or 50 minutes. I couldn't tell you if what was going on, who was around me, who was in front of me, who was beside me, nothing, because I made a choice in my heart to allow the all-consuming presence of God to be able to come in and consume me in a moment. And there are those that are here today, you had a choice to make. You either sit back and you allow that presence to go forth and not partake of that, or you open up and you let Him take you to the places that you were designed to go. You let Him pour His love out on you, how you were designed for love to be poured out upon you. Those that are in presence or near presence, but not having the encounter you were designed for, because your heart is not open to the presence that's around you. I'm going to say that one more time, because that's just what I was just talking about. There are those that are in presence. If you were here this morning, if you've been here for the last hour and 19 minutes, you have been in His presence. But there are those that are in presence or near presence, but not having the encounter that you were designed for, because the position of your heart is not opened up to allow His presence that is around you to consume you. That is a choice for you to make. That is on you. It is my job as a leader or a pastor of this house to be able to make that open and to be able to host His presence here. But it is on you as the people to enter into that presence, to enter into what it is that He is doing here. That's a choice on your part. That's a choice in your heart. I can only take us so far. I can only get us to so many places by bringing order and doing the things that God has called me to do and being obedient to His word and what He has told me to do here. But ultimately, individually, it is going to be up to you. If you were here this morning and you did not enter in, that choice is on you. And I encourage you to begin to open up and begin to let your walls down, as we were singing about this morning, and begin to let Him come in and consume you with an all-consuming love and begin to take over. But many of us don't don't want that because we feel like if we let go, we're out of control. We feel like if we let go, we have no control over everything, when in reality, we like control. We like to know what's next. I like to know when I go get in my car that it's going to crank, and then when I get to work at 6 o'clock tomorrow morning, that maybe not tomorrow morning, but when I get to 6 o'clock, to work at 6 o'clock in the morning, that there's a coffee pot there. There's all of these things that we have and we know and we expect and we go forward. But let me tell you something. Whenever you begin to get into this measure of presence like we experienced today, there's a stepping out of the boat. There's a crossing over that has to happen in your life and in your heart, that you almost have to have this blind faith and this blind trust to be able to step out and say, you know what, God, I don't know what's on the other side of that door. I don't know what's on the other side of that river. It's raging, but if you'll dry it up, I'll cross over today. And I'll begin to take back the land that you have called me to take back. And I'll begin to be a conqueror like you've called me to be a conqueror. Then I'm telling you, but it requires a level of trust in our heart. And it requires a seed of faith that is inside of each one of us. Each one of us. But we have to be willing to step out in faith and to begin to trust. I'm not standing up here today. I hope you know that I'm not standing up here today, and when I say the word faith, I don't throw that around very flippantly, because I want you to know that I'm not speaking out of something because I read a book and it sounded good and I highlighted it and memorized it. I'm telling you because I've stepped out of the boat myself. I'm telling you because I have stood at the raging river and I have watched him dry it up, and I have crossed over my own self, and I'm a walking, living testimony, and my family is a walking, living testimony to be able to tell you, to be able to speak to you today audibly through these speakers, to tell you that I don't care what it is that is in front of you. I don't care what it is that is behind you. I don't care what it is that's in your past or in your present or what you think is going to come out in front of you from your past and come back and get you. I'm here to tell you and be a witness to you today to tell you that the light and the love of God and the power of His presence can come in and can consume you and can overtake you and to take you to places that eye has not seen and ear has not heard. And I'm telling you that you will begin to enter into this faith rest. If you talk about in Hebrews chapter 3 and chapter 4, this rest that begins to come out of His presence, and this peace, this all-consuming peace, that even though there may be a storm raging around you and it may not be a fun day and it may not be a good day for you, but there is a peace and a rest that consumes you and overwhelms you even in the middle of everything, even in the middle of every situation and every circumstance. There are those that are in presence or near presence, but not having the encounter you were designed for because your heart not being open up to the presence that's around you. We have an example of this. The story that was the woman that was healed from the issue of blood. You can look her story up in Matthew 9:18 or Mark 5:22. It's in all three of the accounts of the Gospels, or Luke 8:41. When she was around presence, if you go in and you read the story and you go in and you begin to see that there was a huge crowd around Jesus, and people, different versions use different things, but basically there was all sorts of people bumping into Jesus and around Jesus and near Him. I mean, you've seen something like a paparazzi kind of comes to my mind. All these people and all around and all of these things, and people are bumping into people and going back and forth and all this stuff. But in a moment, He says, "Who touches me? Who touched me?" And then His disciples look at Him and say, "Master, what do you mean, who touched you? There's people all around you. There's people all around you touching you and bumping into you. No, who touched me?" What He's saying is who is it that touched me, that had an open heart? Because I felt power go out of me. I felt the Spirit go out of me and heal. And He began to turn around and He began to look at the woman and look out into the crowd, and the woman began to come forward. But it was because of her open heart. Get the picture. What I'm trying to say to you today, there are plenty of people around the presence, around the Jesus that is walking and moving in the crowd. But it is the one that is willing to have an open heart and an ear to hear and an eye to see, and to have that posture of the heart open up to be able to receive what it is that was in front of her. She was following presence. She told herself, if I could just touch the hem of His garment, I would be healed. To be able to reach up and touch Him. It takes us sometimes stepping out of the boat and stepping out and reaching for Him. If you'll draw nigh to Him, He'll draw nigh to you. He is right there, waiting waiting right there, waiting for you. All He wants you to do is turn. All He wants you to do is look at Him. All He wants you to do is to posture your heart and open up to Him and receive what it is that He has for you. It takes an open heart that is willing to receive what He has for you to be able to make that exchange. How many people are in presence at times, but not having an open heart keeps you from exchange? Maybe there are some who have had an encounter, but in the middle of the encounter, hanging on to what it is that you had that He is coming after. The exchange must take place. As we see in the story of the woman with the issue of blood that got healed, she was willing to not only encounter presence, but willing to exchange her brokenness for her wholeness. If I were to talk for a minute, if I were to talk for a minute about just people in your life, people that you have experienced or you've seen them experience and encounter in their life. You've seen them come to a revival service. You've seen them come to a worship service, a normal Sunday morning, or whatever it is, and you've seen them have an encounter. You've seen them have a touch. You've seen God come out because they stepped out and they were willing to move a little bit. And when they stepped out and when they moved, He met them right where they were, and they had an encounter, but the exchange didn't take place. It's kind of a quad-fold thing or a double-folded thing a little bit. When you have an encounter, you have to be willing to make that exchange. You have to be willing to come in with that open heart and begin to say, you know what, Lord, everything that I am, I want you to come in and consume. Everything that I have, I want to give back to you because of what you have done for me, for what you have given me. And that exchange has to take place. And many, many, many times I have come and I have encountered the presence of God, and I would come in and I would lay and I would weep in the presence of God. And then all of a sudden I would get up and realize what it is in that moment that He came in and wanting to take away, I was still carrying because I wasn't wanting to be vulnerable enough or open enough to go to that level. Yes, I was experiencing the presence. Yes, I had tears coming down my face. Yes, I was in the presence of God, but me not willing to let go and me hanging on to what that is that I wanted to hang on to because I didn't quite know what it was that I was doing, or maybe I just didn't trust Him enough and I didn't have enough vulnerability to be able to open up to Him and to allow Him to come in and take that from me. But I want to be a voice piece. I want to be a witness to tell you that when you get in those encounters and you get into those places where the presence of God is consuming you and you have those tears falling down your face and just you feel that warm blanket of love just wrapping around you, that you can trust Him, that you can step out of the boat, that you can move and you can open up and you can let Him consume everything that is behind that closed door, everything that is behind the wall that you have placed on your heart. I know that many of us have probably struggled with people abandoning us, with people coming in and hurt and pain and all of these things, and we carry all these things and we tote all these things, and what we do is we take that perception and we turn it right around and we throw the same perception that we've had with our father or our mother or our brother or our sister or a pastor at one time or whatever it is. We take that same perception and we turn it around and we throw it on God and we say, okay, well, they done that, so He's the same way. And I'm here today as a witness, friend, to tell you that that is not the case, that He will come in and consume you, and He will come in and take everything that is hurt, and everything that is pain, and everything that is abandonment, and everything that isn't how He has classified you and how He has designed you to be, and He will open you up and He will perform surgery on you and He will heal you to the point where you can walk around and you can wake up in the morning and you can hear the birds singing and the peace that overwhelms you, even though the day before may have been a day where you experienced that encounter and you didn't think that you were going to be able to make it one more day, but you wake up that next morning and you realize that you had an exchange and you begin to let His presence come in and consume you like you were designed to. And what begins to happen is a peace and a rest begins to come over your life, and you begin to realize and you begin to understand the goodness of our God. And you begin to understand the goodness of the heart of Abba and how He longs for you and how He cares for you and how He loves you. In Matthew 9:27, I talked about this last week, the two blind men following Jesus. They were willing to follow presence and cross over even the cultural lines that were present at the time. You didn't just enter into a house. They followed Jesus right into the house. You didn't do that. That wasn't something that you done. So they crossed that all because they knew that in presence was where they belonged. In presence was where they knew they would receive their healing. In presence, the peace that surpassed all understanding, the joy and hope that abounds, and a heart that is content, not searching for the next best thing. This was me as a teenager, as a young man growing up. I would go from one thing to the next. It was always about what's next, what's next, what's next. And as I grew older and as I grew up and began to have children, it was always what's next. All I could do is just make it to Friday. If I could make it to Friday, and I could go hunting, then I'd get in this hunting club, and I'd get in that hunting club, and I would do this thing, and I would do that thing, and I was bouncing around because my heart was not content, because I had not encountered the measure of presence that I was designed for. So therefore, I went from A to B to Z to Y to C to D to E, and back and forth because my heart had not found where it had belonged. And I'm telling you, as I watch some of these kids sit over here, and yes, some of them may be playing around or drawing or goofing around a little bit, but it's okay because they're beginning, even at a young age, even if they may not realize it or may not be able to physically comprehend it at the moment, there are seeds that is being placed on the inside of them, and they are encountering a measure of presence on the inside of them that one day when they go to make a choice, there's going to be something that rises up on the inside of them that says, you know what, I don't have to do that because my heart has found where it belongs. I don't have to go that direction. I don't have to be, it doesn't have to be our children don't have to be a statistic that left the church and then we only get so many % back, or this happened or that happened. We don't have to have that. I'm telling you that we can come into a place and host a measure of presence that can consume these children, and even as they grow up into teenage years and older, and they will begin to realize that their heart is not out searching to and fro and left and right and up and down. They have found where their heart has belonged, and it is in His presence. Psalms 27:4, I read this a minute ago. One thing have I desired of the Lord, that will I seek after, that I may dwell in the house of the Lord all the days of my life, to behold the beauty of the Lord and to inquire in His temple. When I began to get into His presence, it began to change everything inside of me. His desires became my desires. His heart became my heart. His presence cured my wandering heart, and I knew that I had found the missing piece that I had been searching for. Matthew 13:44, the kingdom of God is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and covered up. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. I'm here to tell you today that as I was riding around on a lawnmower one day, and I began to encounter the love of God, that I sold everything spiritually. I would have sold everything physically if that's what was asked of me. Everything I knew in a moment I had found where my heart had belonged. I knew in a moment, yes, I had encountered His love. Yes, I encountered His presence. But I began to encounter a presence that day as I began to ride around and begin to hear the voice of the Father telling me that He loves me and that He was fascinated about me, and that He knew the numbers of hairs that were on my head, and everything that He had designed in my heart, and everything that He had placed in me, and everything that I had questioned, and everything that I didn't understand. He just began to come in and just consume that and begin to overtake that. And in that moment, I began to just allow that exchange to take place in my heart. And I began to find where I belong, and it was in His presence. It was in His presence in a moment that a young man trying to strive his way into ministry, trying to strive his way to doing this and to doing that, and having all these goals and having all these ambitions and all of these things. Are those things good? Yes, if they're in the right order. Yes, if they're in the right place that they're supposed to be in. But as I began to ride around, I began to just allow his love to consume me. And that encounter began to be one of the encounters that just started a domino effect in my life. And I began to see my boys encounter the love of God like I had never seen before. And I began to see my wife encounter the love of God like I had never seen before. And I'd be riding in a truck with my brother-in-law, and tears would just begin to roll down our faces because we were encountering the love of God, and we were encountering a presence that I had not experienced before. Because why? Because I was willing to open up one day, and I was willing to allow the love of Abba to come into my heart and to heal everything that was inside of me. And in that moment, as I began to choose to do that, I began to set into motion a domino effect that has ultimately led up to me standing here talking to you today, because I'm here to tell you, friend, if I would not have chosen to open my heart up like I was designed to open my heart up, yes, I opened my heart up to a certain degree, but there is a level of openness and vulnerability inside of you that He wants, and He will stop at nothing to get that from within you. He will stop at nothing to have every piece of your heart, every broken piece, every misplaced piece, every crushed piece, every forsaken piece, every piece that's been stepped on, every piece that's been kicked out the door. He wants to come in and consume it, every single piece of that with His love. And I'm here to tell you that as a witness to you and as a voice to you, to be able to tell you that you can trust Him. And I pray that as you encounter the love of God coming forth, as you encounter the love, as you come, as it comes to you and you encounter that presence, I pray that you have a different perception. And I pray that when it comes in, that you open up like how you were designed to open up, and to be free in His presence like you were designed to be free. Gaining proximity to presence, the darkness has no choice but to flee. Miracles have no choice but to take place. Lives have no choice but to be turned right side up. There is no way that in presence your kids can wander off from Him. This is why we had some of our kids wander off, and I was one of them. I was not introduced into the gaze of His eyes, the kiss of His love that I was introduced. The kiss of His love. I was introduced to a system called church. If I had seen His eyes and knew how much He cared for me and found where I truly belong, I would not have wondered. Religion has taught you to come into His presence. I'm going to be closing here in a minute. Religion has taught you to come into His presence with your brokenness and dysfunction and hide it. Pretend like all is well, when the truth is that proximity to presence was intended to rid you of the brokenness and dysfunction that lies within you. The truth is, presence is the only place that you will be able to fully rid yourself of those things that religion told you to hide. Because we have come into presence and not had an open heart, we have spent years in church and left the same way that we walked in. I don't want people to walk into this house and be introduced into a system called church. I want them to walk into this house and be introduced to an Abba that loves them, and to a Jesus that has mercy and grace and has already paved the way to the heart of the Father. I want this place to be a place that is an all-consuming fire of His presence. And when those that are lost, and those that are hurting, and those that are broken, and those that are addicted walk in here and be set free in a moment, because we as a people were willing to open our hearts up and willing to host a measure of presence that He enjoys, and that He can come in and move and do what He needs to do. Yes, in church, we have encountered a measure of presence. But friend, let me tell you something. There was a line that we stopped at. There was a line that we didn't cross over into another dimension. We are called to go from glory to glory, from level to level, from presence to presence. There's not a place that we get to and then we say, okay, all the boxes are checked. Now let me just survive. I remember a day, and I've told this story before, that I was sitting in a tree stand, and I remember going down the list. I'm saved. I'm filled with the Holy Spirit. I can speak in tongues. I go to church Wednesday and Sunday. I do this. I tithe. But yet something inside of me was not conquered. Something inside of me was still missing. And it was because I had come to a place in my life that I was only introduced into a certain measure of presence that only brought a certain measure of breakthrough. And I was just here surviving. I was in survival mode. But I'm here to tell you, as sons and daughters, we're here to thrive. We're here to have life and life more abundantly. Like John 10:10 says, to have life and have it more abundantly, not just to wake up another day and just go, man, I sure hope I can make it through today. Man, I sure hope I can make it to Friday. I want us to be a people that is convinced that we are the head and not the tail, that we are above and not beneath, that we are the lender and not the borrower. I want to be the lender. I want to be the one that walks around and because of what Yahweh has blessed me with and because of the obedience inside of my heart, that I become the lender and not the borrower, that I become the head and not the tail, and that I walk around and that His presence just pours off of me everywhere that I go. That's the kind of stuff that I want to see inside of the hearts and lives. And coming in here today, like we experience, and begin to come in here and to begin to host a measure of presence like we hosted today, to have your heart opened up so that way the next time that is available, whether it be tonight, whether it be when you leave here on the way home, riding in your car, whatever it is, that when that measure of presence comes in, oh, that's far enough, that line, I can't go over that. No, you open up and you trust in Him and you allow Him to come in and consume your heart. If we would open up our heart and trust, if we could open up our heart and trust when we show ourselves, He will not reject us even in the middle of our darkest hour. He is not capable of rejection. He is not capable of abandonment. One of the promises in Joshua chapter 1 that I have read to you already in the past few sermons, no man will be able to stand against you all the days of your life. As I was with Moses, I will be with you. I will not abandon you, and I will not leave you. Doesn't mean at times it won't be hard or won't be difficult, but it means even in the hardest of times or even in the darkest of days, He will be right there with us, carrying us. The issue for most of us has been that when we get into a hard situation, we have a tendency to try to handle it on our own, when He has already made us victorious, but we must allow Him to carry us through. We try to make our way through it, and we can't because we get exhausted, worn out, whatever the case is, from whatever it is that we're trying to get through. When we were designed to sit in the lap of Abba, and He will defeat every enemy that comes before us. Everything that we come up against, every situation, every circumstance, every darkness that we come up against, there is a posture in our heart that we have to rely on Him, and we have to trust in Him, and He will see us through. I remember there was a time in my life when I was in the darkest place that I had ever been in, and I had seen the darkest thing that I had ever seen, and I did not know how I was going to be able to make it out of it. But let me tell you something. You know what I decided to do? I didn't decide to fast. I didn't decide to go on a 40-day prayer deal. That wasn't in my heart. If that's in your heart and you need to be obedient to God to do that, then do that. Those things are wonderful things. Please understand and hear what I'm saying. What I'm saying is He wanted to show His faithfulness to me in a moment. So I turned, and I had a choice to make. I could either go left and I could try to strive and make my way through it and power my way through it, or I could go right and I could begin to make my way into his lap, and he could begin to overtake every enemy and every darkness that I was staring at the moment. And let me tell you something, friend, that's what I done. I took a right and I got in his lap, and he began, and I could remember it as clear as day. He began to speak out, and I began to hear his whispers. And as I began to hear his whispers, the dark things that I was facing and that were in front of me that seemed like impossible situations, that seemed like impossible circumstance, that seems like there was no way out of it, he began to come in and he began to make a way where there seemed no way. Because of the posture of my heart and opening up to him, that river that seemed yet uncrossable, he dried up and allowed me to cross over. Amen. If y'all would just stand here with me this morning, I'm just going to begin to close. I hope today that I have challenged you to get into his presence. That when you come into his presence, that you open up, that you break your box. See, religion has taught us that we need to make sure we have it all together. For years, I would never come up to the altar because I was scared to death about what other people would think about me. Well, what's he dealing with? What's he going through? And then for some reason, the enemy had tricked me and thought if I were to get out of my chair and I would begin to walk, it was like me holding up a whiteboard with everything that I had done in my life shining behind me for everybody to read, when that was not the case. That the day that I began to move out and move into his presence and begin to cross over, and when I say that, I think of multiple times getting out and crossing over. I don't want you to understand that, yes, there is a significant turn that takes a place in somebody's life, but let me tell you something. There's always going to be a place where you come to where you're always going to ask you want to cross over? You want to cross over? You want to cross over? And for me, even in my own self, as I'm telling you all of these stories and I'm telling you part of my testimony and what I have walked through and what me and Morgan have been through and some of the faithfulness that Yahweh has shown us today, and even taking all of this on as a pastor of this church and all of these things, even in my own heart, I'm feeling a crossing over inside of my heart, a stepping out and a looking out and begin to take over what it is he's designed us to take over, even in my own life. So I don't want you to sit up here and want you to think that I'm not speaking out of a place in my own self and challenging my own self to do what it is that I'm asking you to do. James, you think you can come up and play? I've said this before and I'll say it again. I'm here as a witness to tell you that love will win every time. If we will open up our hearts and allow his love in to conquer any brokenness, unforgiveness, anger, hatred, abandonment, shame, guilt, sin, fear, anxiety, and depression. Instead of having the enemy echo in your ear, yet once again you have failed, opening your heart up in presence will allow you to hear the echo of the Father saying, "You are my beloved," and that he loves you with the same love that he has for his Son.